My name is Mike, and this happened last year when my fiance and I bought our first starter home together. We're an Asian couple, which is relevant to the story. It was a small 2-story house in a basic suburban town in Georgia. There was nothing special about it, but to us it was supposed to be special. It was a typical quiet street, decent backyard, cheap fence, and regular-looking houses lined up next to each other. We felt lucky to even buy a house at our age, so it was a very exciting point in our lives that was quite literally robbed from us, which you'll soon hear why. The first few days were normal. We unpacked, met a few neighbors, and tried to settle in. The neighbor on our right side was a friendly older couple. The neighbor across the street waved and came across to say hi when he saw us. But the house on our left side was different. We didn't see anyone come out of it for the first few days. The curtains were always shut. The house looked clean and normal, don't get me wrong, but it was always kind of dark inside, like no one was home even though there was a car in the driveway. The only time we noticed anything was when we saw someone standing inside their front window one afternoon. My fiancée and I were carrying groceries in from the car when she whispered something to me about it. I looked over and saw a man standing behind the curtain, only half visible but totally watching us. He didn't wave. As soon as he saw us glance at him, he walked away from the window. It was weird, but we didn't think too much about it. Some people are just quiet or awkward. Over the next week, we started noticing him more often. Not outside, but inside his house. I would catch him standing in his living room window sometimes when I left for work. My fiancée told me she saw him in the upstairs window once when she was getting the mail. Every time we noticed him, he seemed to be watching us, but never in a way where he stayed long. The second we looked back, he was gone. One night, something happened that made both of us uneasy in a way we couldn't ignore. Around midnight, I was getting ready for bed when I walked past our upstairs window. Our bedroom window faced directly toward his house. When I looked, out of habit, I saw him in his upstairs window. This time he wasn't halfway hidden or standing behind a curtain. He was fully visible. He stood straight up with his face turned toward our bedroom window. I froze for a second because I wasn't sure if I was actually seeing it right, but the second he realized I saw him, he stepped back away from the window. I remember saying to my fiancée with a laugh, "Oh great, our neighbor's a creep."
While the Who's of Whoville laughed and made cheery, the Grinch hatched a plot to make their season more dreary. Dill pickle seasoning on fries, knitted Argyle stockings. That'll sure make for a shocking unboxing. The new Grinch meal, now at McDonald's. At participating McDonald's while supplies last. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
The next morning, the man came to our door. It was the first time we saw him outside. He knocked politely and introduced himself as Gordon. He apologized for looking like he was spying the night before. He told me he had been putting something on his window ledge and didn't mean to look into our room. He smiled the whole time, and it was a welcoming enough smile to give me a bit of relief. I'm not saying I loved the guy instantly. There was definitely something slightly off about him, but the apology was appreciated. I didn't want to be rude, so I told him it was fine. When I went back inside, I told my fiancé he seemed somewhat nice, but a little weird. We decided to forget about it. A week later, something else happened that we couldn't ignore. In the middle of the night, my fiancée shook me awake, telling me she heard someone in the yard. I was half asleep, but I got up to check the window. Gotta do what you gotta do as the man of the house. When I looked outside, I saw someone walking in our yard. Unless it was fucking Bigfoot, it was definitely a person. A full-grown man walking around like he was looking for something. My first reaction was to shout out, "Hey," even though I knew that wasn't the smartest thing to do. As soon as I yelled, the person walked fast toward the gate and slammed it shut behind him. Since we didn't have anything in the backyard yet besides some gardening tools, I didn't think someone was trying to steal anything, and I didn't bother to check the backyard. I did check the front windows though, and didn't see anyone. I didn't go outside because I didn't feel safe, and eventually, my fiancée and I went back to sleep, even though we felt uneasy. A few nights after that, the same thing happened again. My fiancée woke me up, telling me she heard rustling outside. This time we both heard it clearly. It sounded like someone was shimmying something. I can't say what, but best description I could give was some kind of lock. I went to the window again, and sure enough, I saw someone in the backyard. I felt my whole body tense up this time. I yelled that I was calling the cops. The person walked out of the yard and again slammed the gate the same way, but this time I saw enough of the man's face and posture to know it looked exactly like Gordon. I yelled Gordon, but he didn't respond. He just walked away like nothing happened. This time I went outside. I checked the yard, then the sides of the house. I took a deep breath and told myself I have to confront this now. I walked over to Gordon's house and knocked. He answered within seconds, which told me he was awake the whole time. He smiled like he always did and started laughing while telling me that it was him in the yard. He said he was chasing away kids who always jumped the fences in the neighborhood, and he caught them jumping from his backyard into our backyard. He said it happens all the time and told me I'd get used to it. He kept smiling the whole time, but something about the smile didn't feel normal. It felt like something was behind it. I saw hate in his eyes, I swear. I didn't argue with him. I just told him I understood and went back home. But deep down, I didn't believe a word he said. The next day, he came over again and invited us to come to his house for Chinese food the next night, which would be a Friday. We felt like saying yes would at least clear the awkwardness between us, and we could just be cordial neighbors. We went to his house around 7 p.m. that Friday. The second we walked in, the atmosphere felt uncomfortable. Gordon seemed relatively intoxicated and got only more drunk as he kept sipping more wine. He said he ordered a bunch of Chinese food and made a little weird comment like, "I know you guys love Chinese food," then laughed. He made little passive-aggressive comments here and there. Eventually the food arrived and he paid, and we offered to help him set up the table, but he almost yelled when he said no. The whole dinner felt tense. Then, as he finished more and more wine, he started acting more differently. He started making rude comments that were less passive and more direct. He said things that made it pretty clear he didn't like that an Asian couple moved into the neighborhood. At first we tried ignoring it, hoping it would stop, but then he got louder and more angry. I mean it, he actually started getting himself angry as he talked about how this town had a history of being white. He started saying things that made both of us feel unsafe, honestly. Then he told us that it was in fact him going into our backyard those nights. He didn't deny it or try to hide it. The climax of the night was when he yelled at us that we were not welcome there and that the neighborhood wasn't for people like us. At that point, we didn't say anything. We just stood up and left. We walked back to our house as fast as we could. We didn't even talk about it until we were inside with the doors locked. We didn't know what to do except go to the other neighbors. So we walked door to door, asking them about Gordon. Some of them were shocked when we told them what happened. Others weren't surprised at all. A few people told us Gordon was a drunk whose wife left him years ago. It didn't make us feel any better because we were living next to him now. We tried to avoid him after that. We didn't look at his house, we didn't go outside unless we had to. But how long could you avoid your next door neighbor? Every night felt tense, like he could be watching us or trespassing again. Then, one night, a brick was thrown through our downstairs window. It shattered glass all over the living room. We both jumped out of bed when we heard it. When I ran downstairs, the brick was lying on the floor. No note attached or anything, just a brick. We knew it was Gordon. There was no one else it could have been, but we had no proof. We filed a police report. The police came to talk to him, but he denied everything. He acted confused and told them he had nothing to do with it. The police couldn't do anything except document the incident. We talked about putting up cameras and staying to fight it out. But honestly, we were too scared, and this was mentally exhausting already. We both felt like something worse would happen if we stayed. Not even 2 months after moving in, we started packing again. We couldn't live next to someone who hated us and had already gone into our yard at night and then thrown a brick at our house. Before we left, we filed another report explaining everything. The police said they would keep an eye on the situation, but we didn't feel protected. We moved out of that house and out of that neighborhood as fast as we could. We left behind the home we thought would be our first chapter in life together. I still think if we stayed there, you'd have eventually heard of my fiancée and I on the news having been murdered by this man. I wish it wasn't illegal to dox people. Boy, would I love to drop his address in this story. All we can do now is move on and upward from here.
Gifts for the outdoors and the outdoorsy. Eddie Bauer.
Wawa's holiday drinks are here. Try the peppermint mocha or new snickerdoodle iced latte.
This story happened a couple of years ago, around late 2021. My name is Noah, and me and my fiancée Gabby, who is now my wife, had moved into a new house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It was a nice 2-story house, perfect for our future family. The neighbors seemed friendly and welcoming as well. Most notably, the neighbors that lived to the right of us seemed the friendliest. It was a couple in their late 30s, but I wasn't really sure. The husband's name was Daniel, and his wife was named Veronica. They were very friendly and seemed like sweet people. They even baked us a red velvet cake as a little welcoming gift. The cake was really good, and we couldn't thank them enough for it. The first couple of weeks were good in the new neighborhood. It was quiet and peaceful, until we started noticing strange things with our neighbors, Daniel and Veronica. One night, around 11 p.m., I heard shouting coming from outside. I looked out my bedroom window and realized it was coming from their house, like they were arguing. I couldn't see them because the angle of the houses blocked my view. Eventually, I saw Veronica storm out to her car and leave. After that, it was quiet again. I told Gabby about it, and we just chalked it up to them getting into an argument and Veronica leaving to cool off. I was kind of concerned because they seemed like such sweet people, not the type to have heated arguments. But every couple has disagreements. We didn't think too much of it. Later on that same week, Gabby and I were coming back home. When we got out of the car, we heard yelling coming from inside their house again. They had their main door open, but the storm door was closed, so we could hear them arguing clearly. Again, it wasn't our business, so we ignored it. Then one day, I noticed Veronica's car wasn't there for a few days, but I assumed maybe she was on vacation. Daniel was still there because his car stayed parked, and I would see him go out once in a while. But then it became a week, then 2 weeks, and Veronica's car was still gone. My wife noticed too and thought maybe they got divorced or something, which would make sense due to their constant arguing. But the way she left was so sudden. One day her car was there, the next it was gone. And Daniel was acting weird. Every time we saw him, he would try to avoid us. He wouldn't wave like neighbors usually do, and the rare times I talked to him, he would talk fast and try to end the conversation as soon as possible, like he was nervous. Something was definitely up with him. After 3 weeks of Veronica being gone, I decided to go over and ask Daniel how things were. My fiancée argued against it, saying it wasn't our business and to leave it alone. But curiosity got the best of me, and I knew she was curious too, so I rang his doorbell. I knew he was home because his car was there. It took him almost 3 minutes to answer, and when he did, he looked off. He was sweating like he just ran a marathon, and he had this weird forced smile like he was hiding something. I asked him about Veronica and why I haven't seen her or her car in a while. He hesitated and said, she just went to go stay with her mom for a while out of state because she's very sick and she's looking after her. I felt like that was a lie, but I didn't question it. I might have believed him if he wasn't acting so strange. I then asked why he was sweating so much, and he said he was doing workouts upstairs. He was speaking really fast, like he was rushed or nervous, but then something happened that made my heart drop. I heard a voice scream from somewhere inside the house. I wasn't exactly sure where, but I was almost positive it was a woman's voice yelling for help. I asked what that was, and Daniel quickly said, "Oh, I'm playing a movie upstairs and forgot to pause it." That made no sense since he had just said he was working out upstairs. I just said okay and told him I would catch him later. I went back home and told Gabby everything. She was just as concerned as me and told me to call the cops. I did, and I requested to stay anonymous, even though Daniel would probably know it was me. I told the dispatcher that I heard something in my neighbor's house and wanted them to do a welfare check. Eventually, an officer pulled up. About 10 minutes later, I heard sirens and saw 5 police cars and an ambulance. Me and Gabby rushed outside. Officers were everywhere. Daniel was being taken away in handcuffs while Veronica was being rushed to the ambulance on a stretcher. We later found out Daniel and Veronica had been in an abusive relationship and things had escalated badly. Daniel kept her locked in the basement for weeks. I didn't even know they had a basement. Down there, he would assault her, rape her, abuse her, and do horrible things. He even sold her car to make it look like she wasn't home. When I heard that scream while talking to him, it turned out he stabbed her 5 times because she had made noise when he told her to be quiet while he answered the door. That explained why he was acting so strange. Unfortunately, Veronica didn't survive and passed a couple hours later. As Daniel was being escorted into a police car, he said, "I know it was you who snitched on me, and you'll regret this." I wanted to laugh it off if the situation wasn't so messed up, knowing he would be behind bars for a long time. It's crazy how you never know who people truly are behind closed doors. Daniel seemed like a friendly, normal guy, and so did Veronica. They seemed like a great couple, but obviously they had serious issues hidden underneath. Fast forward a couple nights after the incident, I woke up in the middle of the night. It was dark, and I saw the silhouette of a person. As my eyes adjusted, I saw that it was Daniel. My heart dropped. He said, "I told you you would regret this." He was holding a knife. I tried talking him down, telling him to calm down and just talk, but he didn't respond. I pressed myself against the headboard. Then, out of nowhere, he lunged at me. I screamed, and then I woke up for real. I was breathing heavily, and Gabby was beside me. She asked what was wrong, and I said it was just a bad dream. She went back to sleep, but I couldn't. The fact that I dreamed about my neighbor who murdered his wife breaking into my house to kill me chills me to this day. Most dreams fade, but this one stayed vivid, and the words he said in the dream were the exact same ones he said while being taken away in cuffs. I never told my wife about this dream. I don't know why. I guess because she might think I'm crazy or it would just stress her out. Eventually, after we got married, we moved to another part of town. It's a nice, quiet neighborhood and a great house, but the whole event traumatized us. Knowing we lived next to a murderer still haunts us.
So tasty, it could make Poseidon switch to a spoon. Holy divine taste from the Greek gods.
You filming?
Yep. I'll post it.
Try rolling your wrist, dude.
Keep your eyes up.
Heading over now.
Come on, I'll be out front.
My name is Devin, and this happened 2 years ago when I was 24 and living in a duplex in Queens, New York. It was a small, old house that looked divided right down the middle. I rented the left side, and some man rented the right side. I never met him. I never even saw him. The landlord said he kept to himself and worked nights, so it didn't concern me. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor, and the wall of my bedroom was the same wall as the neighbor's bedroom. If I pressed my ear up to the wall, I could hear faint movements on the other side sometimes, but that's to be expected in New York City. The first week that I lived there, nothing strange happened. I worked long hours, came home tired, ate something simple, and went straight to bed. I was just happy to have my own place. And then one night, things began. I was lying in bed scrolling on my phone when I heard what sounded like a man talking, but it didn't sound like a normal man's voice. It was high-pitched, like someone trying to talk in a fake voice. It was faint, and it was being spoken from the other room, but the wall was so thin that it felt like the person was standing right next to me. I couldn't understand what he was saying. It was just this weird high voice mumbling. I tried to ignore it. Maybe he was on the phone, or maybe he was watching something on TV. Eventually, the mumbling stopped and I fell asleep. A few nights later, though, the mumbling came back. But this time it was louder, and this time it was definitely a man talking. I pressed my ear lightly to the wall and listened. It didn't sound like he was on the phone. It sounded like he was talking to himself. I didn't know whether to laugh or be slightly creeped out. To block the noise out, I put the blanket over my head. I had work early the next morning and I needed sleep. I think that was the first night I realized I did not like living there alone. 2 weeks after that, the knocks started. I was lying in bed again, half asleep, when I heard 2 taps on the wall right next to my head. It was so close that I flinched like someone was touching me. I sat up and waited a few moments in silence, and then there were 2 more identical taps on the wall from the other side. I knew for sure that it was not a house settling noise that could just easily be explained away. I rolled away from the wall and sat there shaking. I kept waiting to hear something else, but it went quiet. I wanted to knock back, but I realized that acknowledging it would likely make it worse. The next morning, I told myself it was not a big deal and that I was overreacting. Over the next week, the knocks continued. Sometimes soft, sometimes harder, always at night, and always when I was trying to sleep. One night it went on for so long that I put in headphones and turned on a loud fan. I remember lying awake thinking about how thin the wall was, how close his room was, how close he was. He could literally be lying just 2 feet away from me. It scared me more every night. But still, the knocks could have just been him sitting against the wall and accidentally banging or tapping the wall with something. But then came the night that everything changed. I'll never forget it. I was lying in bed on my side, facing the wall. My eyes were closed, but I was not asleep yet. The room was dark, except for my street lamp shining through the blinds. I heard the knocks again. 3 slow ones. I kept my eyes closed and tried not to react. Then I heard that same high-pitched man's voice come through the wall. It was muffled, but not that muffled. I could hear each word clear enough. He said, "What are you doing in there?" My lungs locked up. I sat straight up in bed, shaking so hard I felt my teeth chattering. This was no longer just potential accidental taps on the wall. He was now acknowledging me directly. He said it straight through the wall. I could just tell he said it like he knew I was right next to him. I grabbed my phone and called my boyfriend. I whispered to him that I was scared out of my mind and told him exactly what happened. He told me he was coming over right away and he would stay the night with me. I stayed sitting up with the lights on until he arrived. The rest of the night, nothing happened. It was almost worse that way. It made me feel crazy, like the neighbor knew my boyfriend was there.
Nationwide is so much more than a great insurance company. They're one of America's largest financial services companies. Like how I'm more than just Peyton Manning. I'm also...
For a few days, things were quiet. I started thinking maybe it was just some weird coincidence that the neighbor was doing something and I misheard. But then a few nights later, something happened that made me leave the house running. I still have bad dreams about it. I was asleep this time, fully asleep. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but I woke up fast. Something snapped me awake. I sat up slightly, and then it started. The knocks on the wall, like someone drumming their fingers right beside my head. I screamed back without thinking. I shouted for whoever it was to leave me alone. I was shaking and breathing hard. I think mustering up the courage to finally yell back spiked my adrenaline. I don't know exactly what I expected next, but I will tell you, what did happen next, I never expected in a million years. There was a voice. It came from inside my room. A voice in the dark said, "Go to sleep." It was not the voice from the wall. It was deeper and closer, right there in my room. I launched off my bed screaming. For some reason, the brief moments of my running through the hallway and down the stairs was a blur, because I really just remember getting outside and running into the street screaming for help over and over. I must have looked insane. I ran barefoot onto the sidewalk. I kept looking behind me, expecting someone to be chasing me. I didn't stop screaming until a man 2 houses down came outside and stared at me like he didn't know what to do. I begged him to let me use his phone to call my boyfriend, but he said by the sound of it I needed to call the police. So I called the police instead. I waited by that man's sidewalk shaking and crying until the police arrived. When they showed up, I told them everything that happened. They asked me if I was sure that someone was in the house, and I said yes, 100% yes. They drove me back to my duplex, and 2 officers went inside. My front door was still wide open like I left it. They said there were no signs of forced entry. They asked me if I remembered unlocking the door as I ran out. I had no memory of touching the lock. I told them I didn't think I unlocked it, but I was so panicked that maybe I did. I couldn't be sure. They checked every room, every closet, under the bed, everywhere. No one was in the house. They knocked on the neighbor's door too, but he wouldn't open up. It looked like he wasn't home at all. Eventually, my boyfriend showed up and took me back to his place. I was still shaking hours later. I don't remember sleeping again the rest of the night. In the morning, I called my landlord and told him everything. I told him I needed to know who the neighbor was and if he had any history of problems or strange behavior. I also told him I wanted to break the lease immediately. At first, he pushed back. He said he needed notice and paperwork. I told him I would not step foot in that duplex alone again, and he needed to help me. It took a whole day of phone calls before he said he would let me break the lease. My boyfriend came with me every single time I went back to the duplex to move my stuff. I refused to go alone. During those days, we tried knocking on the neighbor's door multiple times, but he never answered. It was like no one lived there. But there were signs that someone did, like packages at the door and a car in the driveway, but no human response. I ended up moving back in with my parents for a while until I found a new place. I still don't know if that neighbor was actually in my room that night, or if someone got in without the police noticing, or if it was just all in my head from the stress. But that one's the least likely explanation because it's pretty clear what's real and what's in your head. My landlord told me later that the neighboring tenant eventually moved out too without saying a word. I don't know what really happened in that duplex.
The new SpongeBob movie Search for SquarePants menu is now at Burger King. Try it today.
Here we go.
Dog night, man! It's dog night! Sunday night football.
I camp alone pretty often, especially after rough stretches at work. I'm a paramedic, which means I've seen pretty much every stupid way a human body can get wrecked, and sometimes the only way to breathe again is by stepping away from it. Medicine Bow felt perfect, empty and quiet. Funny how the one place I went to clear my head ended up showing me something I still can't logically account for. I kept it simple. One small clearing off a forest road I'd camped at once years back. No fancy gear, just the tent, a cheap lantern, a camp chair that always feels slightly broken, and a first aid kit laid out the way I always do. My truck was parked maybe 40 yards away through some brush. It felt good being somewhere that didn't hum or beep. The first night was perfect. Not Instagram perfect, just calm. Wind in the branches, tiny critters breaking leaves now and then, an owl far off. I ate, read a paperback, and fell asleep fast. Honestly, I wanted the whole trip to be like that. Night 2 proved me wrong. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up, one of those abrupt awakenings where your eyes pop open and you don't know why. The tent was pitch black, but there was this faint glow bleeding through the fabric on the back side. Soft and white, like moonlight with direction. I unzipped the flap and leaned out just enough to look. I saw lights, small white dots moving behind the tree line. Not flashlight beams. The glow didn't cast shadows or waver like someone walking with a handheld. They looked like orbs or steady points, floating between waist and chest height. My brain immediately started troubleshooting. Hikers? Rangers? Drones? Reflection from something? I kept running down options, trying to categorize what I was seeing instead of treating it like something bizarre. But every explanation fell apart when I noticed how the lights moved. Too smooth for walking, too steady for stumbling, too low and silent to be drones, and always weaving through the trees with this weird consistency, like they were following a path. I should have been scared right away, but honestly, I felt more confused than anything. Paramedic mode, break down the problem, find the rational piece. So I slipped on a jacket, grabbed my headlamp, and sat in my camp chair to watch. The woods were silent. No footsteps, no voices, no engine deeper in the brush. Just those little white lights drifting behind the first row of trunks. Every once in a while, one of them shot upward, straight up, and vanished. Then another would glow back to life farther down, like whatever was out there didn't care about distance or obstacles. I actually whispered, "What the hell?" at one point, even though nobody was around to hear me. I thought about yelling out just a quick hello or anybody out there, but a part of me didn't want whatever that was to know I'd noticed, and that instinct felt important. After a few minutes, the lights dimmed out, one by one. The forest went completely dark again, and for some reason, that made everything feel heavier. I sat for another minute, telling myself it was just drones or some weird ranger equipment test, even though I knew that didn't sit right. Then I went back into the tent and zipped up, trying to sleep. I almost drifted off when I heard the footsteps, soft, slow, circling the tent. Not tiny scurries or deer hooves, these were careful steps, heavy enough to bend twigs underfoot, spaced out like whoever it was trying to listen between each one. My pulse kicked up, but I didn't move. I just stared upward, listening. I pressed the tent fabric with my fingers to steady myself and raised my headlamp, turning it on so a glow spread across the inside walls. I expected to see a moving silhouette, but there was nothing. Just the faint shapes of branches swaying above me. The steps dragged around to the back of the tent, where my head was. They stopped right there. I stopped breathing, like instinct. The kind of instinct you get from walking into a dangerous scene and knowing you need to listen before you act. Then I heard it, a light tap on the tent pole. Not enough to shake it, more like someone touching it with a finger, testing how thick the fabric was, testing where I was. I snapped. I unzipped the front of the tent so fast the zipper snagged, grabbed my knife, and burst out with my headlamp swinging. Nothing. The clearing was empty. Cold. Silent. The trees were so still it felt like they were holding their breath with me. I swept the light around, scanning for prints, shadows, shapes. There was nothing between me and the road but brush and dirt. I walked toward the tree line where the lights had been earlier. Not a single fresh footprint. No tire tracks either. No sign of anything. That's when something inside me just said, "We're done here." I'm not going to pretend I sprinted or panicked. I didn't. But I packed up just about as fast as any training drill I've ever done. Tent down, gear thrown in the truck bed, headlamp never turned off. I drove until I hit the first gas station with lights bright enough to sting my eyes. Parked there and sat in the cab, hands on the wheel, telling myself I'd gotten rattled over floating dots and footsteps. That exhaustion had made me see patterns in shadows, but the more I tried to rationalize it, the more it felt like lying to myself. When I got home later, I spent a stupid amount of time looking up every possible explanation. Drone models, ranger night patrols, survey equipment, experimental forestry tech. Nothing matched silent floating lights that shoot upward. Whatever was out there in Medicine Bow didn't feel like something I want to meet again. These days, when someone suggests a solo camping trip in that forest, I just tell them, I'm suddenly very into Airbnbs. I've always thought of myself as the paranoid one in my relationship. I'm a nursing student, I listen to true crime while folding laundry, and I triple check locks before bed. My boyfriend makes fun of me for it, lightly, in that "you're cute but dramatic" way. And I'll say this up front, I wasn't wrong about being cautious. I just never expected to be right in the way that mattered. This happened last year, outside Sedona, Arizona. We wanted a cheap couples weekend. Red rocks, stars, enamel mugs, all the aesthetic things you pretend aren't cheesy. We were broke, so instead of an official campground, we picked a dispersed spot off a forest road a blogger said was perfect for privacy. We found the spot late afternoon, a small clearing with an old fire ring, pine trees creating a semicircle of shade, and a sliver of red rock visible between branches. Quiet, warm. Close enough to the road that we could hear the occasional car, but far enough that nobody would randomly walk past us. We set up the tent, laughed about how romantic it was to share one sleeping bag, cooked a terrible camp dinner, and watched the sky go dark. It was peaceful in a way I didn't know how badly I needed. Before bed, I did what I always do when camping. ran both zippers to the top, and clipped them together with a small carabiner. I remember making a joke, "See, all my podcasts trained me for this moment." And he laughed. Just after midnight, I half woke to fabric shifting, a soft little brushing sound. I assumed it was him rolling over, or maybe the rainfly catching a breeze. I didn't open my eyes. I adjusted my legs inside the sleeping bag and drifted back out. The night didn't feel dramatic. Nothing jolted me awake. No nightmares, just that tiny sound I ignored. Morning came with that bright yellow tent glow. My back ached from sleeping on rocks, he was snoring in my ear, and everything felt normal and harmless. He made a dumb joke about camping being invented by liars, and I reached up automatically to grab the tent zippers. That's when everything changed. The carabiner was hanging loose, and the zipper was halfway down. My brain stalled. I stared at it like it was a math problem I'd forgotten how to solve. "I know I clipped this," I said. He sat up. "What?" I turned the flap so he could see. He blinked hard. "You definitely clipped it." We both knew it. We both remembered it. I asked if he got up to pee and maybe forgot to re-clip it. He shook his head immediately. Didn't leave the tent once. Something cold ran through me. A mismatch between memory and reality. We stepped outside, and the second wave of wrong details hit us. One of our backpacks was turned at a different angle, like someone nudged it with a foot. A granola bar wrapper that had been inside the pack last night was now sitting on top of it. My shoes, lined up neatly the night before, were no longer side by side. One was slightly forward, the other angled out, like someone slipped their feet in halfway and then stepped out fast. Our cooler latch was unhooked. Everything almost where it had been, but not quite. Outside the tent, in the dust, were footprints. Not ours. Different tread. They circled the tent, stopped right where the zipper was, then faded into the harder ground, giving us no direction of where the person came from or where they went. That's when he tried the rational voice. Maybe it was a ranger checking on us? At 2 a.m, I shot back, without a flashlight, without saying a word. The look he gave me said he already knew that wasn't the answer. We didn't stay for breakfast. We packed up with this tight, quiet urgency. No discussion, just unspoken agreement, and drove back to town. But the real horror didn't hit until later. We were home, unpacking, when he suddenly said, "Oh, my phone. I set it to record last night." He'd tucked his phone in the tent pocket before bed, set to capture ambient sound. We'd forgotten about it. We sat on the couch, still smelling like smoke, listening to hours of wind and crickets. It was almost calming. Then the timestamp hit 2:07 a.m. A new sound faded in. The unmistakable sound of a zipper being eased down, slowly guided. I heard myself shift in my sleep on the recording. Heard him mutter something and adjust. The zipper stopped. Then, very faintly, the crunch of gravel directly outside the tent. Light, careful footsteps. We leaned closer to the phone, barely breathing. And then we heard it. A whisper. Not a word either of us could make out. Just a human voice, inches from us, saying something low and calm. It lasted 1 second, maybe 2. But I'll never forget the tone. Not aggressive, just assessing. The recording continued. We didn't finish the rest of the file. We didn't talk much afterward either. Just sat there with this electric silence between us, both trying to pretend we weren't replaying the same realization. Somebody opened our tent while we were sleeping, stood there long enough to move things, listened to us breathe, whispered something, and left without taking anything. We didn't send the audio to anyone. What would we even say? "Hi, someone maybe watched us sleep. Please help." There wasn't a crime, no damage, no missing items. Just the knowledge that a stranger was comfortable enough to unzip our tent, inspect us, and walk away as if we'd passed some test. Since then, I don't do dispersed camping. I only go to official campgrounds. I double-clip zippers. I keep a headlamp and keys inside the sleeping bag with me. And I don't laugh at true crime narrators anymore when they say, "Trust your instincts." Because now I know exactly what it feels like to wake up safe and realize that safety was an illusion. Someone unzipped our tent, looked inside, and decided to wait. And somehow, that's the part that keeps me up at night. I'll be honest up front. I'm not the camping guy in my friend group. I'm the bartender. I like neon signs, music loud enough to drown thoughts, and chairs that don't sink into dirt. But last summer, all four of us decided a boys' weekend in Michigan's Upper Peninsula was exactly what we needed. It was me, Kyle, his cousin Mark, and our friend Jesse. 4 grown men acting like we were about to rediscover the frontier, even though we packed more beer than actual food. We found this nice little lakeside spot, 1 ring of rocks for a fire, 1 patch of dirt for a tent, lake glittering through the trees. Perfect if you didn't think too hard about bathrooms or bears. First couple hours were straight comedy. The tent almost flew into the lake twice. Mark argued with the instructions like they insulted his mother. We got it standing anyway, tossed all our sleeping bags inside, and officially declared it livable. Daytime was everything it should have been. Swimming, roasting in the sun, stupid jokes, skipping rocks, pretending none of us were dealing with breakups, job stress, or real life. The place felt peaceful, harmless, until the old man showed up. It was late afternoon. Sun still bright, everything glowing warm yellow. I saw someone walking on the trail. A man, maybe mid-70s, flannel shirt, faded cap, a stick he used like a hiking pole. He didn't wave. He just stopped right at the edge of camp. Not in it. Not out of it. Right on the border. Kyle raised his beer. "Hey man, you lost or want to hang with us?" The old guy shook his head. His expression didn't change. He looked at us like he'd already made up his mind. "You boys should pack up and head out before dark," he said. Just like that. No hello. No reason. Just the warning. Mark grinned. "Yeah? Why's that?" The man's eyes drifted over the camp, the tent, the firewood, the cooler. He didn't look scared or angry, just certain. "Woods change at night out here," he said. "You don't want to be in them when they do." We waited for him to say more, but he didn't. He gave us a nod that felt more like a goodbye and kept walking down the trail. We did what any group of grown idiots would do. We laughed it off. "Ooh, spooky woods," Jesse teased. Kyle clinked his beer against mine. Probably just hates campers. I said, if he wants us gone so bad, he could at least help pack. We moved on. But if I'm honest, even while joking, something about the old guy lingered with me. Night fell faster than expected. 1 minute, the lake was glowing orange. The next, it was a sheet of black glass. We lit the fire, turned the Bluetooth speaker down low, and kept talking. That's when I noticed the silence. The insects stopped. All at once. No frogs, no splashes from the lake, no rustling. Just our fire and our voices. Then something moved just outside the firelight. One heavy step. Another. Branches bending, not breaking. Kyle grabbed his flashlight and pointed it into the trees. The beam hit nothing but trunks and darkness. Whatever was out there stayed just behind the limit of the light. Probably a deer, Mark said, a little too confidently. We yelled out, trying to sound brave. "Hey, yo, old man, if that's you, we brought beer." No response, but the walking stopped. We sat closer to the fire after that, pretending it was for warmth. Jesse got up to pee by a nearby tree, headlamp bouncing as he walked away. He came back less than a minute later, fast, face pale. "What?" Kyle asked. "You see a squirrel coming at you with a knife?" "No," Jesse said quietly. "I saw eyes." "Animal eyes?" Mark asked. Jesse shook his head. They were at my level. None of us joked after that. A few minutes later, the woods started moving again, this time circling. You could hear it shifting around the perimeter of our little clearing. Sometimes behind us, sometimes beside us. Never running, never approaching. Just watching. Once, on a gust of wind, I swear I heard something else. Not words exactly, more like someone talking too low to understand, carried between the trees. I tried brushing it off as nerves, or the wind, or my imagination. But my mouth had gone dry, and even I wasn't cracking jokes anymore. Finally, I said, "Let's get in the tent. We can keep talking inside. I'm done being out here." Nobody argued. We crawled inside the tent, zipped it up fast, and sat there shoulder to shoulder. Kyle held a knife. I had the flashlight pointed at the ceiling like I was ready to swing it around at the first sound. The tent suddenly felt thin. Too thin. At one point, something brushed against the outside of the fabric. Not hard. Not aggressive. Just enough to let us know it was right there. No one breathed for a few seconds. Another brush, this time on Jesse's side. We didn't say a word. We stayed in that tent the rest of the night, talking quietly, drifting in and out of shallow sleep, jerking awake at every pop from the fire outside. When dawn finally crept in, the relief felt like a physical thing. We unzipped the tent and stepped out slowly. That's when we saw them. Footprints. Wide, heavy impressions, circling our campsite. 3 different sizes, looping around the tent, and the little tripod of twigs Jesse had set up as a joke earlier, it was now standing less than a foot from the tent door, leaning toward it. Someone had moved it during the night. We didn't discuss it. We just packed up. Fast. Nobody said we were scared. The official reason was the weather, even though the forecast was perfect. On the drive out, we passed the trail again. I kept looking for the old man. He wasn't there. Now, when people ask if the trip was fun, I say, yeah, mostly. But sometimes late at night when I'm closing the bar and walking alone to my car, I think about that old man standing at the edge of our camp. And the one thing I can't shake is this. If he was messing with us, he did a perfect job. And if he wasn't, we ignored the only warning we got. I took that trip because I needed to prove something to myself. After the divorce, the apartment felt like a half-empty storage unit, and I kept catching myself turning to say things to someone who wasn't there anymore. I figured a few nights alone in Ocala would reset my brain. Just quiet, trees, and the kind of silence you don't get when you're sharing walls with people arguing through drywall. I picked a campground with amenities just barely above primitive. A bathhouse, a water spigot, a few numbered sites spaced out in a loop. Thick trees, sandy soil, Spanish moss hanging off branches like cotton. It felt safe enough, but still remote. Exactly what I wanted. First day was good. I set up the tent, strung a tarp between a couple trees, got the stove going. Made a simple dinner, canned chili and a beer, then just sat by the fire feeling the way the night air settles over everything in Ocala. You can hear insects and leaves brushing one another. No TV, no text pings, no tension. I remember thinking, this is the first quiet I've had in months. The only thing that felt off was a campsite a little farther down the loop. One tent, one old sedan. No fire, no lantern glow, no clatter of someone cooking or setting up gear. It wasn't weird enough to worry about. Maybe they'd gone to bed early. Maybe they were night hikers or something. I didn't dwell on it. By around 11, I was poking at the fire, letting it burn down to coals. I had that relaxed, beer-warmed heaviness settling into my shoulders. It was the first moment in a long time I wasn't replaying old arguments or trying to guess what I'd done wrong in the marriage. And then I heard footsteps. It wasn't someone rushing or sneaking. It was an even crunch of sand and leaves, coming from the path between the campsites. I waited for a flashlight beam. A greeting. Something that made sense. Instead, a man walked straight into my circle of firelight and sat down on the log across from me like we'd arranged it. No hesitation at all. Not even a hello. Just walked in, lowered himself onto the log, and settled in like he belonged there. He looked late 30s, maybe early 40s. Faded t-shirt, jeans, no backpack, no water bottle, no anything. Average height, average build, but he had this wide grin on his face, not friendly or excited, just fixed, like a mask. I tried to be polite. "Hey man, you from the site down there?" He didn't answer. He just stared into the fire, then at me, then back at the fire. This slow, repeating pattern, like he was waiting his turn in a conversation I hadn't agreed to be part of. I cleared my throat, tried again. "Everything all right?" Still nothing. Just that grin. I tried small talk, weather, fishing, the usual camper stuff. He didn't respond to a single word, didn't nod, didn't shrug, just stared and grinned. And the longer it went on, the more that expression felt like a warning instead of a smile. Then I noticed his hands. His fingernails were dark, not dirt from the campsite, but stained like grease or oil baked into them. And he kept flexing one hand, slowly, like he was psyching himself up for something. That was the moment a very old, very primal part of my brain started whispering that I shouldn't let that man get behind me. Not ever. But I kept my tone calm. I didn't want to escalate anything. "I'm gonna crash soon," I said finally. "Long drive today. You good, man?" That's when he finally spoke. "You're in my spot," said it brightly, cheerfully, like I'd stolen his seat at a backyard barbecue. I blinked. I actually booked this one online, Site 14. I even reached over and grabbed my printed reservation. I held it out a little like that would clear everything up. He didn't look at it. He just shook his head and repeated, still smiling, "No, you're in my spot." The way he said it had nothing to do with campsite numbers. Something cold unspooled in my chest. I stood up slowly, keeping the fire between us. "Why don't we go talk to the camp host?" I said. "Make sure nothing got mixed up." The man's grin dropped like a switch was flipped. He stood up too, rising in this unnervingly smooth motion, and took 3 small steps backward without turning around, eyes locked on mine the whole time. Then he stepped past the edge of the firelight and vanished into the dark between the palmettos and pines. No flashlight to follow, just swallowed by the dark in a way that didn't feel normal. I didn't move for a full minute. I kept staring at the space he'd disappeared into, waiting for him to reappear or for some twig snap to tell me where he'd gone. Nothing. That was it. The fire hissed softly, the night hummed around me, and I realized I didn't want to spend even a second unprotected. I put the fire out, threw what I could into my car, and sat inside with all the doors locked. Seat pushed back, knife on my lap. I didn't sleep a minute. Everything sounded like footsteps around the car. When the sun finally started smearing orange across the trees, I stepped out of the car with shaky legs and went to check that neighboring campsite. Tent, sedan. But no chairs, no lantern, no trash, no tire marks suggesting someone had driven in recently. It looked like a staged site, like someone set it up just to make it look occupied without ever actually using it. I walked straight to the camp host's station, tried not to sound insane. "Hey, did the people at Site 17 check in?" The host clicked around on his little computer. "Reserved," he said, "but they never came to the office. We figured it was a no-show." I left early, packed everything, didn't even bother folding the tent. I just wanted out of that forest. I've met drunk guys at campgrounds, lonely guys, weird guys. They all want something. A beer, a lighter, company, conversation. But that man, he wanted something I can't name. Something that had nothing to do with camping or conversation. Something that felt personal, even though I'd never seen him before. I ended the trip early and don't regret it one bit. I don't know who he was. I don't know where he came from. And I definitely don't know why he walked into my firelight like he'd been waiting for me. But I know one thing. He didn't care about the campsite. He just wanted me to understand I wasn't where I thought I was. I spent 8 years in the Army before this story happened, so being alone in the woods doesn't rattle me. It's usually the opposite. No traffic, no civilians yelling into phones, no radios buzzing in the background, just trees and my own footsteps. That's what I wanted when I headed into Shenandoah for a 3-day backpacking trip in 2019. I had a solid route and a light pack. Told a friend my general plan. Nothing complicated. Day 2, late afternoon, I cut slightly off trail near a ridge and found a good spot. Flat ground, some cover, and enough visibility to see anything coming. I set up camp the same way I've done on countless field exercises. Food hung high, tent positioned with a main exit, boots and knife within reach, everything squared away. I boiled water for dinner and watched the last light bleed through the trees. Perfect. Quiet. Exactly the kind of evening I'd been craving. I was cleaning up when I heard someone call, "Hello," in this overly friendly tone. Not worried, hikers cross paths out here all the time. I answered, "Over here." A man stepped between the trees. 40s, average build, wearing brand new looking hiking clothes. No dirt on him, no sweat. "Glad I'm not the only one out here," he said. "I think I got turned around." He named a junction he was supposedly trying to find, but when I asked which way he came from, he pointed in the wrong direction. Not a little wrong, completely off. "How long you been lost?" I asked. "Couple hours," he said, but his shirt looked like it had come straight off a hanger. No creases from a backpack strap, no bottle in his hand. Nothing. Then he started in with the questions. "You camping around here tonight? How long you staying? You out here alone? You get service up here?" Each one sounded casual on its own, but together, they were a checklist. I told him the trail he needed was back the opposite way, and I offered to walk him to it. He refused immediately. "Nah, I like exploring," he said, but his eyes kept drifting across my camp, over my tent, my stove, my knife. He wasn't looking for the trail. He was assessing the space, trying to understand what he'd be dealing with. When he asked again if I was alone, I lied without blinking. "No, group of us a couple miles back. I'm just the first one setting up." His whole posture shifted. Slightly, but enough. Whatever he thought I was, a lone target maybe, suddenly wasn't the case. "Ah, nice. Yeah, I should, get back before dark," he said, laughing awkwardly. And this is the part I still think about. He left with no pack, no gear, not even a water bottle. Just wandered deeper into the trees like he was heading somewhere familiar, or somewhere he'd already planned. When he finally disappeared from sight, I didn't tear camp down immediately. I waited, acted like I was still prepping my stove, listening, watching. A few minutes later, I heard a branch snap off to my right, not in the direction he'd walked. Then another, a little farther downslope. Controlled steps. I packed. Not messy, not reckless, just efficient. Years of muscle memory clicked in. Tent down, food bag lowered, everything stuffed and clipped in minutes. I put 2 miles between me and that ridge, choosing a second campsite with better visibility. No thick brush, open ground, a defensible angle. Night settled in and I stayed awake longer than usual, listening to the kind of subtle movement you only pick up through experience. Too far to call a threat, too close to ignore. Every so often, a small noise, a step, a shift, floating from the same general direction. Could have been a deer, could have been branches. But when you've done enough time around predators, human ones, you learn the difference between wandering and watching. I left early the next morning and ran into a ranger near one of the main junctions. He asked how my trip was going, and I told him, only weird thing was a guy who wandered into my camp yesterday. Said he was lost but didn't look it. No gear, no pack. Kept asking if I was alone. The ranger's expression tightened immediately. "Where was this?" he asked. I gave him the ridge area and watched his face sink just a hair. "We've had a couple complaints about a man bothering solo hikers out that way," he said. "Asking where they're staying, how long they'll be out, that kind of thing. No ID yet. If you see him again, Don't engage. Get to a station. That's all he said, but the look on his face was enough. I didn't need the details. Back at my car, I kept thinking about the man walking away with nothing but the clothes he was wearing. No pack meant no food, no jacket, no shelter, no reason to be lost. He wasn't surviving out there. He was hunting. People picture lost hikers as harmless, somebody who wants directions, maybe water, maybe help. Sometimes that's true, but anyone who's done search and rescue knows the woods don't just swallow people. They also attract people who take advantage of how isolated they are. Someone like the man I saw doesn't need a weapon or a threat to be dangerous. All he needs is a target who thinks they understand the situation. That day, I made sure I wasn't one. I still backpack, still camp alone sometimes, but I lie faster now. I listen harder, and if anyone wanders into my campsite with a clean shirt, no gear, and too many questions, I don't wait for the story about how they got lost. I leave first. If you kept thinking, man, camping is supposed to be peaceful, you're not alone. Smash that like button, subscribe so you never miss the next scare, and tell me in the comments which story messed with you the most. And if you think long drives are relaxing, you haven't watched this channel enough. This next video will ruin highways for you. Click now to watch 4 scary road trip horror stories.
She has 2 birthdays now. Jay, she was born.
I-40 is one of those roads I've done so many times that it's like my hands just know what to do. Amarillo to Oklahoma City, then home. Same gas stations, same coffee that tastes like burnt dirt, same late night emptiness that makes the whole highway feel like it's hanging in space. That night started like any other end of the week drive. I'd wrapped up a job in Amarillo, tossed my tool bag into the bed of my old pickup, set my cooler on the passenger floor, and hit the road a little after 9. I always prefer getting home over wasting money on a motel, so nighttime highway runs have pretty much become my routine. Trucks smelled like drywall dust, and the gas station coffee I just bought. Country station low on the radio, cruise control a few clicks under the limit. The sky was clear and pitch black. Every now and then a semi drifted past. Calm, familiar, not the kind of night that stands out. Then the van showed up. I caught the headlights in my mirror first. Normal enough. But instead of passing, the vehicle settled right behind me and stayed there. White cargo van. No windows in the back. No logo. Generic as they come, like something a contractor would drive. It wasn't exactly tailgating, but it was close enough that the inside of my cab lit up. I tapped my brakes once, a polite back off. It backed off for a second, then eased up to the exact same distance. I tried not to overthink it. It could be someone feeling uncomfortable driving alone at night, and also, people follow very closely without even realizing it. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I bumped my speed up. The van matched it. I slowed down. It slowed too, perfectly, like we were attached by a rope. That's when the calm started thinning out. I slid my mirror into night mode to cut the glare and caught a faint glimpse of 2 shapes in the front seats. Hard to see details, but it looked like the passenger was facing me through the rearview mirror. The clock hit 12:37 a.m. Something about that time dug into me. Maybe because it was too late for normal errands and too early for commuters. It was the hour where only truckers, insomniacs, and people up to no good are on the highway. 10 more miles. The van never moved an inch from my bumper. I started thinking like a guy doing a field check. Test 1, switch lanes. I flipped my blinker, eased into the right lane. The van followed, not around me, behind me. Test 2, drop speed way down. Again, they mirrored me. Test 3, Speed up. Same result. At that point, the excuses dried up. This wasn't zoning out or impatience. This was intentional. A rest area was coming up, one of those dim ones with vending machines and bathrooms. I figured if I took the exit and the van kept going, maybe I'd misread the whole thing. If it followed me off, well, then I'd know. When the blue sign appeared, rest area 1 mile, my hands were already a little too tight on the wheel. I put my blinker on early. The van's blinker came on at the same moment. My stomach pulled tight. No other way to describe it. The ramp curved in and the lot opened up. Mostly empty except for a semi parked at the far end. Yellow lamps gave everything that washed out color like an old photograph. I rolled into a spot close to the building. Nose out. Kept the engine running. The van didn't park. It crept in behind me and stopped sideways in the lane in front of my truck, blocking the exit route. Then I noticed something I should have noticed earlier. The side door was already cracked open. It wasn't open much, just enough to see the dark inside and movement, a shape shifting in there. My headlights caught part of someone's hand wrapped around the interior handle. Nobody got out. Nobody yelled. They just watched me. That door gap felt like a mouth half open. I could see the driver clearly now. Hood up, face turned toward me. No confusion, no friendliness, just watching. The passenger leaned forward too, still angled at me. Behind the cracked door, a third figure was crouched with something long across his knees. Could have been a pipe, could have been a bat. Whatever it was, I didn't want a closer look. Everything in me said, go. I put the truck in reverse and eased back like I was going to circle the lot. The van pulled forward slightly, closing the angle. That tiny movement flipped a switch. Nope, I said out loud. I jerked the wheel hard and hit the gas. The truck bounced over a painted island and thumped the curb. The wrench I keep between the seat and console slid forward and slammed into my foot. I threaded between the sleeping semi and a row of empty spaces and aimed for the exit. My rear tires skidded a bit, but caught again. In the mirror, just for a moment, I saw the full inside of the van. 3 men, all staring, none smiling. Back on the main highway, I called 911. My voice sounded weird, too calm, like someone else was talking. I gave the dispatcher what I remembered. White van, 3 men, Oklahoma plates, but only part of the number, and what had just gone down. She didn't sound surprised at all. We get calls like that sometimes, she said. You were lucky. You shouldn't have stopped. Don't pull over if they catch up again. I kept checking the mirror for miles. Every set of headlights felt too close, too bright, too suspicious. I skipped my usual gas station because a white van was parked under the lights near the air pump. Probably innocent. I didn't go near it. A couple weeks later, I found a post on a trucker forum about travelers along I-40 getting boxed in at rest stops by white vans with cracked doors. No arrests, no clear details, just experiences that lined up a little too neatly with mine. Now I avoid empty rest stops completely. Busy exits only. If headlights sit behind me too long, I get off and let them pass. I keep that wrench closer than before. And if I see a white cargo van parked anywhere at night with the side door cracked open, even a couple inches, I don't stick around long enough to find out who's waiting behind it.
This holiday, Verizon is helping you bundle up incredible gifts and savings. You'll get the latest phone with a new line on My Plan, and a brand new smartwatch and tablet. No trade-in needed, even on our lowest price plan. That's 2 gifts for your family and 1 for you. Or 2 for you and 1 for someone else. Or 3 gifts for you and only you. Either way, you save big on 3 amazing gifts at Verizon. All on the best 5G network. Visit Verizon today. Rankings based on Root Metric Truth Score report dated 1/2025. Your results may vary. Service plan required for watch and tablet. Additional terms apply.
I've spent most of my adult life driving toward trouble, not away from it. That sounds dramatic, but if you've worked EMS, you know what I mean. Lights, sirens, bad weather, bad roads. If something awful is happening, odds are I'm pointed at it with a jump bag in my hand. I've been a paramedic for nearly 2 decades, and if there's one thing I'm guilty of, it's this. Even off duty, I behave like I'm on shift. Highway, grocery store, parking lot. If something looks wrong, my brain snaps straight into work mode. That night on Highway 2 reminded me why that instinct can get you killed. I had just finished a 14-hour shift, the kind where you don't remember eating, but somehow your uniform still ends up stained with things you hope are coffee. It was cold, North Dakota cold, and the highway was nothing but 2 black lanes stretching forever between empty fields. I was replaying one of the calls from earlier, mentally rechecking every decision. We all say we leave work at work, but no medic really does. You take the people home with you, whether you want to or not. I was halfway through the stretch toward my place when a red flicker broke the darkness ahead. At first, I thought my eyes were tired, but as I came closer, it formed into something unmistakable. An emergency flare, burning low on the shoulder. My hazards were on before the thought even finished forming. That's muscle memory. You see a flare, you slow down. Someone needs help. Up ahead was a sedan, angled weirdly toward the ditch. All 4 doors open, driver door hanging wide like someone had jumped out fast. No hazard lights, no shattered glass, no smoke. Just silence and that hissing flare. I pulled a safe distance behind it, popped my trunk, and grabbed my small off-duty med kit. Just enough gear to stabilize someone until real backup arrived. As soon as I stepped into the cold, the wind cut right through me. It carried the smell of burning flare and frozen dirt. North Dakota in a nutshell. I approached the car, calling out, "EMS? Anyone injured?" Nothing answered except the wind. The interior dome light was on, shining down into an empty cabin. No driver, no passengers, no blood, no dropped phone or wallet. 2 empty coffee cups in the front, a fast food bag in the back, but not a single sign that anyone walked away, ran away, or crawled into the ditch. And the keys were still in the ignition. That was the first moment something tugged at me, an itch under the ribs. Still, protocol is protocol. I swept the ditch with my flashlight, checking for someone thrown from a vehicle. Nothing but frozen grass and an old soda bottle. I took a deep breath and called dispatch on the med line. "Off duty," I said. "Mile marker 87. Sedan with all doors open, flare burning. No sign of occupants." They ran the plate. Not stolen, registered locally. Troopers were en route, but far. "Clear if you need to," dispatch said. "You're not required to stay." That's polite medic speak for, this could be bad. I walked around the car again, slower this time. The more I looked, the stranger it felt. There was no damage, no skid marks, no reason for someone to deploy a flare, unless the flare wasn't the result of a problem, but the bait. I crouched to move the flare farther from the road, and that's when it clicked. It was positioned perfectly, dead in line with where headlights would naturally pull a driver's attention. Something we do all the time at real crash scenes. Someone out here knew exactly how to guide a good Samaritan off the road. That was the moment everything inside me shifted. I straightened up slowly, feeling the entire dark field pressing in. The tree line beyond the ditch was pitch black, solid, impenetrable. With my flashlight out, I realized I couldn't see anything beyond a narrow cone of light. If someone was standing 10 feet away, watching me, I wouldn't know, and I was lit up perfectly by my own headlights. I stepped backward, not fast, just enough to put distance between me and that open car with its open doors. "Dispatch," I said into the phone. "I'm clearing until officers get here." They acknowledged. I kept facing the fields, walking backward until I reached my car door. Only then did I unlock it and slip inside. As I pulled back onto the highway, I kept checking the mirror, expecting headlights to flare up behind me. Maybe another car, maybe that same sedan. What I saw was worse. Nothing. Total dark. I drove the next 10 miles with the kind of awareness you only get after a call that rattles you. Every silo looked like a person. Every shadow looked like movement. The next day, on shift, I asked one of the troopers if they'd figured out who owned the car or why the doors were open. He scrolled something on his tablet, then shook his head. Car wasn't there when we arrived, he said. No flare, no debris, nothing. Tow truck? I asked. Nope. We checked. Nobody logged a tow. He hesitated, then added, sometimes people set things up to get folks like you to stop. You guys are predictable. You're trained to run toward emergencies, makes you easy targets. I thought about that flare, placed just right, like someone who understood EMS language, someone who knew how we think, how we react. For the first time in years, I felt stupid for stopping.
Nationwide is so much more than a great insurance company. They're one of America's largest financial services companies. Like how I'm more than Saquon Bar.
At work, of course, that didn't change anything. We still roll up on single vehicle scenes all the time. We still jump out with bags ready, scanning the ground for victims. That's the job. But on personal drives? No, not anymore. Now, if I see a flare in a car with no damage and no people, I keep going and call it in. The guilt hits me every time. The instinct to stop is still there, beating in the ribs like a second pulse. But the memory of that silent sedan on Highway 2 hits harder. The empty seats, the open doors, the flare burning like a signal meant just for me. What stuck with me most wasn't the fear. It was the feeling that someone out there had rehearsed this. Someone who knew how to build a scene convincing enough to stop a medic on her drive home. Someone who wanted to see who would pull over. I'd had one of those days where everything stacked up. Home visits running late, notes half finished, conversations still echoing in my head. By the time I got onto I-5 heading south out of Sacramento, it was a little after 11 p.m. My only goal was to get home, shower, and not think for a while. Traffic was light, mostly semis, a couple stragglers like me heading home from late shifts. It's a stretch of highway I've driven 100 times and usually find comforting. About 10 minutes in, headlights appeared behind me. Nothing unusual. They came up fast, so I expected them to pass in the left lane. Instead, they settled right on my bumper. Okay, I muttered, go around. I signaled and moved over to give them room. The car followed. They flashed their brights once, just long enough to be annoying. I signaled and moved back again. Same result, same distance. Another flash. I checked my speed. I wasn't too slow, wasn't drifting. Sometimes people get weird on the road, so I tried to brush it off, but my shoulders were creeping up toward my ears. I tried speeding up a little. The car sped up. I eased off. It eased off. My stomach got tight in a way I didn't want to acknowledge. I'd dealt with angry drivers before, but this felt like more than just someone in a bad mood. I switched lanes again. The car shadowed me perfectly. After the third time, the brights went on and stayed on longer than a normal flash. I grabbed my phone and hit the call button on the steering wheel. 911, what's your emergency? There's a car following me, I said, trying not to sound panicked. Flashing lights, tailgating, several miles now. The dispatcher asked for my location, direction, make of my car. I answered while keeping my eyes glued ahead. There was a pause, a strange one. Thankfully, I was still wearing my AirPod in one ear, so the sound wasn't coming out of the car speakers. Then, I need you to stay on the line. Don't pull over, and answer this carefully. Are you alone in the car right now? A chill crawled across the back of my neck. Yeah, I said. Of course. Okay, the driver behind you is one of our callers. He says he can see movement in your back seat. My mouth went dry. My first instinct was to whip around and look, but something about her tone kept me facing forward. Did you check your back seat before getting in? She asked. Earlier flashed through my mind. Juggling my bag, locking a client's front door, cursing because I dropped my keys, tossing everything into the back seat, and sliding in fast because the yard light was out. I hadn't checked anything. The headlights behind me flashed again, longer. Okay, the dispatcher said. Units are heading toward you. Keep driving. Don't look back suddenly. Don't pull over until I tell you. I focused hard on the road, forcing myself not to feel the weight of the empty space behind me. Exit coming up in about a mile, I said. That works, she said. You're going to pull onto the shoulder before the ramp. Stay somewhere lit, doors unlocked. When the trooper instructs you, you'll get out and walk toward his vehicle. Do not open the back door yourself. My hands were slick on the wheel. The exit sign came into view. My caller stayed behind me, perfectly aligned, brights pulsing like a warning. A minute later, red and blue lights appeared ahead. Relief hit me so hard I felt dizzy. Units are with you, the dispatcher said. Go ahead and pull over when you're ready. I signaled, moved to the shoulder, and stopped. The car behind me braked hard too. Okay, she said, put it in park. On my count, unbuckle, get out, hands visible, and walk straight to the patrol car. Ready? 3, 2, 1. I stepped out into the cold air. A trooper motioned me forward. Behind me, another trooper approached my car, weapon at the ready. Ma'am, keep walking, the first trooper said. Then I heard shouting from behind me. Out of the car, now! Hands where I can see them! A scuffle followed, grunting, feet scraping asphalt, something metal clattering. I didn't turn around. The trooper in front of me didn't let me. It was only after they had him cuffed that I was allowed to see. They dragged him into the lights. A man pulled from my back seat. Long matted hair, filthy clothes. A box cutter still lying near where he'd hit the ground. He stared at the pavement like he didn't understand what was happening. The driver who'd been behind me stood near his own car, hands shaking. He looked at me with this exhausted, relieved expression, like he'd been terrified the entire time that I wouldn't understand what he was trying to tell me.
It's moving day. That's right, Mint Mobile is coming home to your home. I mean, if you'll have us.
At the station, I gave my statement. They told me the man had warrants in other counties. Squatting, weapon charges, attempted burglary. He refused to answer questions about how long he'd been in my car or what he was planning. Based on the timeline, he must have slipped in while I was walking out of my client's yard. One street lamp had been out for weeks. It only takes a second. The highway is loud. Cars passing mask small sounds. I never had a chance to hear him move. When they finally let me go, it was close to 3 a.m. I drove home with every interior light on, backseat checked 3 times before starting the engine. For weeks afterward, I checked the backseat every single time I got in, even in daylight, even in my gated parking lot with neighbors watching. If anyone asked, I joked about being paranoid. But the truth is, a part of me still hears that dispatcher's voice. The driver behind you says he can see movement in your backseat. And the worst part? Now, when I'm driving at night and someone stays behind me too long, I don't know which scenario to be afraid of. The car behind me, or the thing I haven't seen yet, sitting just out of view. I've always preferred empty highways to crowded cities. Give me a tank of gas, a camera bag, and a long stretch of road, and I'll take that over sidewalks any day. That's how I ended up on Route 93 one late afternoon in 2021, heading from Vegas toward Phoenix after a week of shooting desert landscapes. My hatchback was loaded with gear, batteries charging in the back seat, and tripods wedged near the door. The sun was dropping fast, the desert looking wide open and endless. Route 93 is mostly empty, and I've always liked that. Less traffic, more sky. I cracked the windows to let the warm air in and kept a podcast low, settling into that steady rhythm of cruise control and fading daylight. A few miles ahead, I spotted a cluster of motorcycles, 6 or 7 of them riding in a loose formation. Leather jackets, patches, chrome catching the sun. Nothing unusual for that stretch. They were going slower than me, so I signaled and pulled into the oncoming lane to pass. As I rolled alongside them, I felt several helmets turn in my direction. Visors down, no faces, just that collective tilt of attention. One lifted 2 fingers in a biker wave. Totally normal. I nodded back and continued on. Soon, they shrank in my rear view until they were just dots again. The sky dimmed to purple, then deep blue. I turned the podcast off to enjoy the quiet. 10 minutes later, I checked the mirror again. The dots were bigger. Much bigger. The group had closed the distance without me noticing. I eased off the gas slightly, thinking I'd let them pass if they wanted to go faster. But instead of passing, they rearranged themselves. 2 bikes slipped in behind me. 2 pulled up alongside, 1 on each side of my back doors. Another drifted ahead of me, matching my speed. In less than a minute, they'd boxed me in. I tried telling myself it was an accident, just a cluster reforming after a long, straight stretch. But every time I adjusted my speed, even by a little, they adjusted too. The biker on my left kept angling his helmet toward me, visor reflecting my car like a black mirror. It didn't feel random. It felt coordinated. I checked my phone for service, 1 bar flickering. I kept my eyes forward, hands at 10 and 2, forcing myself to breathe normally. I tapped the brakes once, lightly. The bike behind me tightened the gap. The one in front reduced speed too, matching me down to the mile per hour. They weren't pacing the highway. They were pacing me. The desert outside, which usually feels like freedom for miles, suddenly felt like a place you could scream and still not be heard. A few more miles passed like that. My heart wasn't pounding, but I could feel something coiling inside my chest, like a knot about to cinch tight. I needed to call 911. I hit the speaker button and tried. The call dropped before it rang. I tried again. This time it connected. 911, what's your emergency? I'm on Route 93 heading south, I said. There's a group of bikers around my car, like surrounding it, controlling my speed. The dispatcher asked for my location and car description, then said, okay, stay calm and stay on the line. Are they displaying weapons? Making threats? No weapons, I said. They're just staying right next to me, really close. She told me not to pull onto a dark shoulder and to aim for the next populated exit. Units are patrolling that corridor, she said, but they're not close. I kept driving. The bikers kept their formation. The sky finally dropped into full darkness. The stars out, the road just a tunnel of headlights. Then the lead biker raised his arm and started circling it overhead, some kind of signal. Immediately, the whole formation shifted. 2 bikers on the right peeled off toward the shoulder. Then the others followed, 1 pair at a time, until the only lights around me were their red taillights disappearing down a barely visible dirt trail, cutting into the desert. No wave, no gesture, no explanation, just gone. I stayed on the call until I reached the next gas station. A little island of fluorescent light in the middle of nowhere. I parked under a security camera and turned off the engine, letting the silence press in. The dispatcher asked if I felt safe. I said yes, even though my hands were still tight around the wheel. Inside, the clerk listened to the story as he rang up my water. He shrugged. We get biker clubs running this highway. Some are fine, some aren't. You never really know until something happens. I didn't love that answer. Later in my motel room, I transferred all my photos to my laptop. Landscapes, roadside shots, sunset variations. Then I found a frame I didn't remember taking. A blurred picture from inside my car. Bikers surrounding me on all sides. Headlights flaring in the dusk. 1 visor angled toward my window. My finger must have brushed the shutter without noticing. I stared at that image for a long time. I still drive desert highways, just not alone anymore. And I don't assume an open road means open freedom. Now, whenever a group of bikers appears in my mirror, I remember that boxed-in stretch of Route 93 and how quickly people can decide you're part of their formation. If I ever see a group closing around me again, I won't wait to see what their signals mean. I was driving home from campus for the weekend, hours later than I meant to. My study group dragged on, and by the time I got on the highway, it was already close to 9 p.m. 5 hours of freeway, horror stories, and caffeine. I'd done it 100 times. By midnight, the road had that strange emptiness to it. Not dead, just spaced out. A semi here, a pair of headlights 10 seconds behind you, then nothing again. I kept telling myself I'd stop at the next rest area, use the bathroom, stretch, then power through the rest of the drive. Around 1 a.m., a blue sign finally showed up. Rest area, 1 mile. When I pulled in, it looked fine. Not crowded, not deserted. A couple semis, a minivan, and one dark sedan parked near the building. Bathroom lights buzzing under those pale fluorescent fixtures. I remember thinking, safe enough. I parked under a light, grabbed my phone, locked the doors, and headed inside. The women's bathroom was exactly what you'd expect. Harsh lighting, white tile, long echoes. Empty. I picked the middle stall, shut the door, and let myself breathe for a second. Then the outer bathroom door creaked open. Light footsteps came in and stopped. Not at the sinks, not at the stalls. Just right outside mine. I waited for the latch on another stall to click. Nothing. Whoever it was stood completely still. I cleared my throat, hoping the noise would make the person move along. Instead, a woman's voice, soft, maybe early 30s, said, "Hey, sorry, I dropped something. Can you check if it rolled under?" It sounded embarrassed enough that my guard didn't go up right away. I looked down. Nothing. Just tile and the tips of a pair of sneakers. "I don't see anything," I said. A beat of silence. Then the same voice, quieter now, like she was leaning in closer. "Are you sure? It's really important. Could you check again?" Something about the tone changed. The words were the same, but the feeling wasn't. It wasn't embarrassed anymore. It sounded focused. Before I decided how to answer, 2 hands slid under my stall door, flat on the tile, fingers spread, nails long and chipped. The hands reached in far enough that they would have closed around my ankles if I hadn't reacted. I yanked my feet up onto the toilet seat and pressed my back against the wall. My breath went sharp in my throat. The hands swept from side to side, searching, like someone feeling for a dropped wallet. Then they paused and curled into fists. Light taps hit the tile, frustrated. Then the woman said, sharper this time, "Come on, I saw you come in here." That was the moment the fear hit all at once. I forced out the first lie that came to mind. "My boyfriend's outside," I said, trying to sound calm. "He's waiting right at the door." The hands froze. Then they withdrew, slowly, sliding back under the divider until they disappeared entirely. A few seconds later, I heard steps moving toward the bathroom exit. The door creaked, opened a little, then didn't close all the way. She might have left. She might have just stepped to the side and was waiting. I didn't dare move. I unlocked my phone with my thumb shaking and dialed 911. I whispered, "I'm at a rest stop on I-5 in Washington. A woman just tried to grab me under the stall door. I don't know if she's still here." The dispatcher asked me to confirm the location twice, told me to stay in the stall, keep the door locked, and not respond to anyone except uniformed officers. "Units are close," she said. "Stay on the line." I sat there in absolute silence, feet pulled up, listening for anything. Breathing, shoes, anything at all. But the bathroom stayed completely quiet. Almost too quiet. The kind where your own heartbeat feels loud. Every time the door creaked even a millimeter, my whole body tensed. I couldn't tell if the woman was gone or inches from the stalls. After what felt like forever, there was a loud, firm bang on the outer door.
What would you do if you were hospitalized far from home? Don't worry. AirMed Care Network has you covered with Fly You Home memberships. Just one call, and their providers will transport you back to a hospital of your choice.
"State Patrol." A second voice echoed it. "State Patrol. Announce yourself if you're inside." I cracked the door open and saw 2 troopers in full uniform. They motioned for me to come out. My legs barely worked, but I followed them toward the exit. Outside, the lot looked exactly the same, except the dark sedan that had been parked near my car was gone. No cameras caught anything. No plate numbers, no grainy footage of the bathroom door. One trooper checked my car before letting me get in. Another took my statement right there under the buzzing lights. The thought of those hands actually closing around me made my stomach twist. I finished the drive home, wired and exhausted. I only stopped again at a huge travel plaza full of truckers and families. That was almost a year ago. I still won't use a rest stop bathroom alone after dark. I plan my drives around big stations now, bright lights, lots of people. And I lock the bathroom door in my apartment every single time, even if my roommate's home. But the part that stuck with me most wasn't the hands. It was the voice. Soft, polite, embarrassed, perfectly normal. Hey, I dropped something. Can you check? I hear someone say a version of that now, anywhere, and my whole body reacts before my brain does. Because now I know, sometimes the scariest things don't start with screaming. Sometimes they start with a whisper under a fluorescent light. If any part of you thought the headlights, van doors, or that rest stop whisper were the worst of it, smash that like button, subscribe for more late night dread, and tell me which moment had you gripped. I signed up for Trunk or Treat because it always felt like the safest way to celebrate Halloween. Cars instead of houses, parents instead of strangers, the whole school parking lot glowing under those harsh floodlights. I teach second grade, so most of my kids were still at the age where a superhero cape could make them sprint in circles. That October evening was perfect. Breezy, orange lights strung across minivans, the smell of kettle corn. Parents parked side by side, opening decorated trunks for the kids. I checked my volunteer list, clipped on my badge, and tried to remember which parent had peanut-free candy. Everything about the night screamed safe, familiar, normal. The first time I noticed the man, he was just another adult hovering near the ring toss game. Tan jacket, baseball cap, no costume, no name tag. Not unusual, but he didn't talk to any adults. He just stood near the kids, smiling the way you do when you're trying to look friendly without joining in. I figured he was a shy dad, maybe divorced, not sure how to mingle. But I kept seeing him, near the craft table, then by the cupcake station, then again, lingering by the hay bale photo booth, always close enough to hear conversations, but never close enough to participate. I watched him gently steer a child away from the candy line, saying, "Your dad's right over here." It didn't sound wrong until I saw the little girl's face. Hesitant, uncertain. I recognized her from the class next to mine. "Hey, sweetheart," I called, walking over. "Where's your mom?" She pointed toward the stage where her mom was handing out cider. The man stepped slightly sideways, putting himself between us, smiling like we were all part of the same conversation. "Thanks for helping," I said, tone light but firm. "We've got it from here." He nodded politely and drifted away. For a few minutes, I convinced myself it was nothing. People get confused, kids wander. But every few minutes, I'd spot his jacket again, always at the edge of another small group of children. I keyed my walkie. "Andrea to Station 1. Can you keep an eye on a man in a tan jacket? No name tag. Ball cap." "Copy," our office manager said. "Want me to come over?" "Not yet," I said. "Just keep an eye." He had a pattern. He listened for names, repeated them casually. "Evan, right? Or you dropped this, buddy." He used overheard details like keys. Small pieces of familiarity to unlock trust. I could feel my stomach tighten with that cold, certain realization that this wasn't just awkward behavior. This was practiced. I shadowed him for 10 minutes. He never approached another adult. Every time I got closer, he shifted toward the far row of the parking lot, the darkest part. That's when I saw him gesture again, this time toward two boys. I stepped in fast. "Hey, boys, stay where I can see you." Then to the man, "Do you need help finding someone?" He gave me a pleasant, puzzled look. "They're mine," he said. "Which class?" I asked. "Room 4. We don't number classrooms. We use teacher names." I kept my voice even. "Right. Well, let's make sure they get checked out through the front. He smiled like he didn't hear me and kept walking. Copy, I said into the walkie. We're doing wristband checks now. Quietly, please. Within seconds, our principal was calling the school resource officer. I motioned to another teacher to move wide, circling him from the other side of the lot. The crowd noise swallowed the tension, but my focus narrowed. His route, his pacing, the way he slid toward the shadowed overflow. Sir, I said, stepping up beside him, we'll need you to stay where there's light. He stopped, turned his head just enough that I could see his eyes under the brim. Flat, unbothered. They're mine, he repeated. Then they can come over here and tell us that. He didn't. He pivoted, started walking again, right toward the dark gap between two SUVs. That's when I heard the siren, just close enough for the red-blue wash to flash over the chrome bumpers. Two officers walked in, calm and professional. One of them, Officer Salazar, volunteered at our reading program. She greeted him like she would any nervous parent. Evening, sir. You with us tonight? Just picking up my boys, he said. Great, she smiled. Which family? They're around. Let's find them together. He hesitated, then tried to sidestep through the SUV gap. A nearby dad, bless him, stepped forward, blocking the path. The second officer mirrored him, patient but firm. The man stopped. His face didn't change. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in an hour. Kids kept laughing. Parents kept chatting. The music looped the same 3 Halloween songs. The chaos of normal life continued while, just 20 feet away, a man quietly gave up the act. Salazar spoke gently. Can you point out your kids for me? He looked toward the crowd, clearly realizing there was no easy answer. They're around, he repeated. Okay, she said. Let's talk over here. They moved to the edge of the lot. He handed over an ID from a county miles away. I heard fragments. Prior contact. No custody record. Verify statements. Meanwhile, I walked the lot, checking with parents. None recognized him. None of the kids he'd spoken to were his. The event shut down early. Parents left with their kids, holding them closer. When the last car pulled out, the lot felt enormous and empty. Later, the principal told us police didn't arrest him that night. Just questioned, documented, released. Prior contact in another district, the officer said. And that phrase sat in my head like a stone. It didn't mean safe. It meant almost. We changed everything after that. Wristbands in matching pairs for every parent and child, checklists with names, times, and car descriptions. 2 volunteers at the exit, 1 by the overflow lot, no exceptions. It's strange, the details that burn into memory. Not the police lights, not the shouting. The jacket cuff, shiny with wear, brushing past kids who trusted too easily. The way he hovered just outside contact, hands open, pretending to help. Last year, we added a light tower to flood the overflow row. It ruins the photos a little, but I don't care. I'll take a bad picture over a missing kid any night. When parents grumble about extra wristbands or new sign-out steps, I smile and tell them it's about safety. I don't say the rest, that we built the rules from a night when I saw exactly how thin safety can be. Halloween's supposed to be about pretending. Monsters, masks, harmless scares. That night reminded me that real danger doesn't wear costumes. It wears a dad's smile and waits for people to stop paying attention. Every year, when the music starts and kids scatter in their costumes, I check the gate myself. I test the lock, make sure the volunteers know their zones, that the radios work. And when I hear a voice in the crowd say, right over here, I still look up. Every single time. Because you never really forget the sound of danger hiding inside something ordinary. Halloween doesn't just feel different for kids, it's different on shift too. Paramedics know. Early calls were costume rashes, candy overloads, maybe a scraped knee. Later came the drunk drivers and house parties. By the time the radio crackled that night, it was routine. Possible allergic reaction, pediatric mild distress. Rain had turned to mist, giving the streetlights that soft halo. I sat passenger, gloves ready, watching the blur of porch lights and plastic pumpkins flash by as my partner Richie drove. We pulled up to a blue 2-story house with fake cobwebs on the porch. A mom met us at the door clutching a phone and said, "He's throwing up," said his tongue felt funny. 9-year-old boy on the couch, Spider-Man pajamas under a robe, pale but alert. Beside him sat a plastic bowl of vomit and a small clear zip bag labeled in Sharpie. "Happy Halloween, be safe," with a smiley face drawn next to it. Inside were 2 gummies dusted with a powder that looked like crushed sugar, but wasn't even. It clumped in the creases. "Where'd you get these?" I asked. 3 doors down, Mom said. They had little baggies for each kid. It looked thoughtful. His vitals were off, pulse slower than it should be. Not an allergy, something else. We started fluids and loaded him for transport. I sealed the candy bag in a specimen pouch, labeling it with the address. By the time we handed him off at Albany General, his heart rate had steadied. The doctor promised to test the candy. I'd seen enough sugar highs for one night, but something about that smiley label stuck in my mind. We barely made it out of the bay before dispatch sent another call. Same complaint, 2 blocks away. We rolled up on a beige house with an inflatable ghost deflating in the drizzle. A girl, maybe 11, sat on the kitchen floor, pale, eyes glassy. Her dad beside her, helpless. She got dizzy, he said, then sick. No rash, no trouble breathing. Same bag, same Sharpie handwriting, same heart over the I. My whole core went tight. The H had the same little swoop, the same neat pressure. I'd seen that handwriting before, on a chalkboard sign at the end of my street. "Please don't block driveway. Thanks." With the same heart over the I. My street. Richie met my eyes. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" "I'm thinking coincidence," I said, even though I didn't believe it. We stabilized the girl and called for PD backup. The hospital called 10 minutes later. Trace amounts of sedative in the first sample. Like a switch flipping, my heart began to race. "Guess who lives 3 houses down from me?" I said. Richie looked up from the chart. "No way." The next call confirmed it. Officers on my street requesting EMS standby for candy tampering investigation. We turned the corner, siren off. My neighbor stood on his porch in a bathrobe and slippers, coffee mug in hand, looking like someone about to water the plants. 2 officers were questioning him. Another held a zip bag inside an evidence pouch. When she saw me, she mouthed, "Same thing?" He smiled at me like it was any other night. "Hey man, big night for you guys, huh?" "Yeah," I said. "I was trying to help," he said to the officer. "Kids eat too much sugar, makes them sick. I figured give them something that calms them down." "Did you make these yourself?" "Just gummies," he said, cheerful. "A little crushed sleeping aid. Nothing dangerous. Keeps them from puking in the street." Richie whispered under his breath, "Jesus." The officer held out a bag from the porch. Dozens of identical zip packs. She opened one and a faint chemical smell drifted out. At the bottom, powder clung to the edges like frost. Another bag contained a fragment of a scored white pill. Sedative, generic imprint visible. He licked sugar from his fingertip before anyone could stop him. "See? Perfectly fine." "Sir, don't touch that," the officer said, but he just shrugged. When she asked to see the rest, he came back with a grocery sack full of them. At the bottom, more tablet fragments. She sealed it without another word. "My wife thought it was cute," he said, nodding toward the dark doorway. "We made the labels together." PD cuffed him. No shouting, no resistance. He even joked, "You're overreacting." We stayed for standby protocol, though there wasn't much for us to do. That the guy who lent you a ladder last spring? Richie asked. Yeah. He seemed normal. Yeah. 3 more calls came in over the next hour. Parents bringing in leftover bags once they saw the lights on our block. One grandma even microwaved a gummy to kill germs before realizing it smelled like pills. The hospital confirmed mild sedative dosage, not lethal, but definitely harmful for kids. No headline came out of it, just a short police blotter entry. The neighbor's porch went dark for a week. His wife kept going to work like nothing had happened. The boy from the first call went home the next morning. The girl too. Lucky kids. For a while, I couldn't stop picturing that Sharpie note. How many parents saw it and thought, someone cares? A few nights later, I walked by his house. The chalkboard still sat at the bottom of the stairs. Please don't block driveway. Thanks. With that same neat heart over the I. The porch light stayed off after that, like guilt or maybe embarrassment. But part of me thought he didn't feel either, just irritation at being caught. Richie called it reckless kindness, but that felt too forgiving. He didn't mean harm, maybe, but he also didn't mean good. He meant control. You'd think I'd seen enough to be numb. But there's something different when danger wears a neighbor's smile, when it looks thoughtful. The next Halloween, I didn't even buy candy. My sister hosted, and I brought sealed store-bought mini bars still in their plastic. I dumped them in the bowl without touching them, feeling ridiculous. When kids came to the door, she teased me. You look like you're expecting a background check. Maybe I am, I said. That night, when we drove home, I saw other streets with those handwritten notes taped to bags, parents still trusting their neighbors. I wanted to yell at them to stop, but you can't live that way. People have to trust something. 2 weeks later, I saw him again. Middle of the day, grocery bags in hand. He smiled, nodded like nothing had happened. No ankle monitor, no guilt. Just the same robe and coffee mug energy in daylight. I nodded back because I didn't know what else to do. What do you say to someone who poisoned your neighborhood with a smiley face? He said, "Hey, you working tonight?" "Yeah." "Stay safe out there," he said. I wanted to say, I'm trying to keep everyone safe from people like you, but I just walked past. We train to look for signs of shock, for trauma. No one trains you to spot the quiet ones, the helpful adults, the safe smiles, the notes that say be safe and mean something else entirely. The job teaches you how thin safety is. It's a film stretched over normal life. One careless, thoughtful act can tear it. I tell new EMTs to look for the details that don't fit. That's where danger hides. Every Halloween now, I tell the same thing to the kids at safety talks. If it's homemade, if it's repackaged, if it has a note that says, be safe, don't touch it. Because the scariest thing I've ever seen wasn't a ghost or monster or screaming. It was handwriting I recognized from 3 doors down, smiling back from a candy bag that looked like kindness. I was 17 and babysitting for one of my mom's friends. A professor, 2 kids, in a quiet street in Madison. They were the kind of family that left instructions on the counter and snacks in the fridge. It was Halloween night, so I came early, watched the kids collect their candy, brushed their teeth, read them a story, and tucked them in by 9. By 9:30, the house was silent. The dishwasher hummed, the old yellow lab slept by the couch, and the porch pumpkins flickered through the blinds. I sat in the living room scrolling my phone, one lamp on, bowl of candy by the door. Then came 3 knocks. Not a child's knock, 3 slow, spaced taps. I thought maybe another parent or someone lost. I stood, stepped carefully over the lab, and looked through the peephole. A skeleton stared back. Plain white skull mask, hoodie pulled up, gloves on. For a second, I thought maybe it was a joke until the voice came through the wood. "Hey, I'm a friend from work. Forgot my phone inside." "They're not home," I said. He paused, then, almost friendly. She said it was on the table. I'll just grab it. The professor hadn't mentioned visitors. You'll have to come back later, I said. He didn't argue, just silence. Then footsteps, fading off the porch. I waited a long time before moving, staring through the peephole. The lab didn't stir. I texted the mom just in case. Hi, anyone supposed to stop by? A man just knocked, said he's a friend from work. No answer. 10 minutes passed. 3 more knocks. I left my keys, he said. She told me to stop back. I felt a jolt in my stomach. You have the wrong house. I looked through the peephole again. Just the edge of a shoulder. He was standing out of view, too close to catch him fully. I held up my phone, snapped a photo through the peephole just to make noise. The second I did, he stepped sideways, out of frame. My phone buzzed. Absolutely not. Don't open the door. We're calling police. Stay upstairs. Then, another message. They're on their way. I turned off the lamp and backed toward the stairs. My legs shook, but I kept it together. Halfway up, I heard him again. Hey, she said I could grab it. I'm her brother. I didn't respond. The lab still didn't move. Then came the doorknob. Not enough to turn, but enough to tell me he'd tried. I reached the top step and checked on the kids, both asleep, breathing slow. I turned the nightlight up a notch and sat by their door, clutching my phone. A faint scraping came from the side of the house, like a hand dragging over siding. Then the back doorknob jiggled. He was circling, trying every entry. Police are 2 minutes away, the mom texted. I slid every deadbolt guard the professor had installed, one by one. Each metallic click felt like an anchor. Then the alarm chirped once. A door sensor triggered. Side door. I froze. My heartbeat was pushing through my throat. The voice came again, almost conversational. Just a second, he said. I knew he wasn't supposed to be there, but the calmness of it made my skin crawl. He said it like he belonged. I didn't move. I didn't speak. Then flashing lights spilled through the curtains. Blue and red. A loud knock followed. Police. I heard quick movement below. When the officers called again, I managed to shout back. When I opened the door, they told me to stay upstairs until they cleared the house. I watched from the kids' window as beams of light swept across the yard. They didn't find him, just shoe scuffs by the basement window well. One clean fingerprint on the outside of the glass. When the professor and his wife arrived minutes later, they looked absurdly out of place in their costumes. Cape, witch hat, glitter still on their cheeks. The relief on their faces almost made me cry. The police took my statement. They asked what he said, what he wore, if he showed a weapon. I told them everything. They said they'd canvass the area and check other doorbell cameras. Nothing came of it. One camera caught him for half a second, just a shoulder, a glimpse of the skull mask. For the rest of the night, I stayed on the couch while the parents talked to the officers outside. I thought about how calmly he'd spoken, how casually he'd lied, and how he never once tried to force the door. He just waited, testing edges. Later, the professor apologized, like he'd invited it to happen. I told him he didn't need to, but I understood. When something like that happens in your house, it stains the routine. I babysat for them again eventually. All lights on, doors double locked. If someone knocked, I called before even answering. Sometimes, though, I still think about that voice. Calm, polite, harmless, until it wasn't. My boyfriend asked why I didn't shout or run. The truth is, that's not how it works. When you're responsible for 2 sleeping kids, fear takes a back seat to logic. You don't panic, you calculate. Which doors are locked, where the exits are, how to keep quiet so they don't wake up scared. The police said it might have been someone trying random houses, looking for an easy one. But I don't believe that. He came back 3 times, always with a new story, always calm. He knew the neighborhood. He didn't want candy. He wasn't loud, wasn't violent. He didn't need to be. He made me question what safe really meant. I kept babysitting after that, but part of me never came down those stairs again. Fear doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it knocks politely and waits for you to be polite back. Don't be. I wasn't planning on standing out that Halloween. I just wanted something cheap and fast. It was late October 2022 in Columbus. My friends were already planning the big bar crawl, and I had nothing to wear. So I stopped at a thrift store that smelled like dryer sheets and dust, rummaged through a clearance bin, and found a rubber half mask with a crooked smirk. $5. Perfect. The cashier laughed when I dropped it on the counter. Creepy little thing, huh? $5 creepy's all I can afford, I said. It smelled faintly of peppermint and glue, probably from whoever tried to fix it. I wiped it off with an alcohol pad, threw on a flannel, and called it a costume. The bars on High Street were packed that night. Music shaking the walls, spilled drinks underfoot. I pulled the mask down just long enough for my friends to laugh and take photos. I was mid-selfie when someone tapped my shoulder. A guy I didn't know stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. "Where'd you get that mask?" "The thrift shop on Hudson," I said, smiling. He leaned closer. "No, that exact one." "See that gouge by the cheek?" I touched the nick on the rubber. "Yeah? So?" He held up his phone and showed me a still frame from bar security footage. Someone wearing my mask bumping into him last weekend. That guy stole my phone. For a second, I laughed it off. "Guess we're mask twins?" He didn't laugh. "Take it off." People nearby went quiet. I lifted the mask off my face. "Man, I just bought it tonight." The bartender was watching now. He grabbed my phone, walked off, and never looked back. "That's the same mask." The bouncer came over. "Everything okay?" "He's wearing the thief's mask," the stranger said. The bouncer looked at me. "You steal a phone?" "No," I blurted. "I can prove it. I've got the receipt." I pulled the crumpled paper from my pocket. "Resurrection Thrift, $5. The bouncer nodded but didn't back off. "Step outside." Out on the sidewalk, the stranger's friends had joined him. 2 men in jackets, tense but quiet. The bouncer called campus police. Within minutes, a cruiser rolled up. The officer listened to the short version. The stranger had a police report number ready. He'd been waiting for this chance all week. "Mind if I take a quick photo of the mask?" the officer asked me. "Go ahead," I said. He snapped it under the cruiser light, that smug plastic grin reflecting back at me. "You said you bought it tonight?" "Yep, from a donation bin." "Did the store say who donated it?" "No idea." He looked thoughtful. "Probably nothing, but I'd avoid wearing it until we're sure. Could be tied to more than one incident." He handed it back. "You're not in trouble, kid. Bad luck's all." Bad luck or not, I shoved the mask into my pocket. My friends found me and tried to lighten the mood, but I couldn't shake the thought someone had used this same thing to ruin someone else's week. The next morning, the officer emailed me. He wanted to meet at the thrift store when it opened. The clerk, a young guy with bleached hair, recognized the mask immediately. "Yeah, I almost tossed it. The strap was glued back on. Some guy dumped a few bags last week and sprinted out before I could even say thanks." "Any cameras outside?" the officer asked. "Just inside," the clerk said. "Bins in the alley." He wrote down the donation date, shook his head, and muttered, "People are weird, man." A day later, the officer called again. "That mask lines up with a few pickpocket cases from last weekend. So the thief's still out there?" "Probably," he said. "Could be a group. Costumes make it easy. They switch masks and vanish." He asked to hold on to mine for testing. Fingerprints, adhesive samples, whatever they could pull. "You'll get it back if it comes up clean." "I don't want it back," I said. He chuckled. "Can't blame you." That night, walking home, I passed the thrift store again. The donation bin sat in shadow, half open like a mouth. For a second, I pictured someone dropping off the mask in a hurry. hands shaking, heart pounding, hoping it would disappear into someone else's life. A week later, the officer updated me. The glue matches a craft brand, too common to trace. But yeah, same style mask shows up in other reports. No arrests yet. He paused. You ever see someone swap costumes mid-party? Yeah, I said. Why? They'd hit a few bars, change masks after each score. Makes ID impossible. So that was it. My $5 impulse buy had been part of someone else's camouflage. People on campus loved the story once word spread. The guy whose costume was evidence. Everyone laughed. I tried to too, but every time I pictured that stranger's face, white, tense, furious, it hit differently. He didn't see me. He saw the person who'd made his life harder. And honestly, who could blame him? For weeks, I avoided anything with a mask. No parties, no costumes, not even winter scarves pulled too high. It's strange how something harmless can carry so much weight once you know its history. A month later, the police emailed again. No match on the mask. We're closing the case unless new reports come in. You're clear. I stared at the message. Clear. Like I'd been dirty before. I never picked the mask up. I pictured it sitting in an evidence box under buzzing fluorescent lights. Just another object waiting for someone else to claim it. But every Halloween since, I still think about it. Because sometimes, you don't need a ghost or a curse to feel haunted. Sometimes it's enough to realize how easily you can wear someone else's story, literally over your face, and not even know it. People romanticize Halloween like it's a harmless night to pretend. But that mask taught me something different. Pretending blurs lines. It lets people test how invisible they can be. Maybe that's what scares me most now, not the jump scares or the horror movies. The idea that someone can hand off their guilt to a stranger with a $5 thrift store drop. And that I almost wore it home smiling. I worked at one of those big haunted attractions outside Kansas City. The kind that takes over an empty warehouse every fall and turns it into a maze of plywood walls, fog, and screams. My job was the chainsaw gag. It's the finale scare. The moment when guests think they've made it out, then I roar out of the shadows. The saw was real, but the chain wasn't. We removed it every night, tagged it with a bright green prop marker, and checked the throttle twice. It made all the right noise without the danger. The job was easy. The floor lead gave the cue over radio. I revved the saw, stepped into the strobe light, and chased them through the last door. Half the time, someone dropped a shoe. People screamed, laughed, and stumbled out the exit, promising to come back next year. Behind the scenes, it was less glamorous. Half theater, half construction zone. A couple of plug-in heaters, a makeup mirror, and the smell of sweat, rubber, and fog juice. Before every shift, we had a safety meeting. Tag checks, first aid location, fire exit reminders. We knew the risks. Scaring people safely takes planning. That October night started like any other. We opened at 7 sharp. The early groups were families and teenagers. Lots of nervous laughter. I'd been doing the job long enough to time my rev to their screams. Around 8:30, during a short lull, I noticed something strange. The butcher. Stationed before my corner, the room where my friend Gabe usually worked, had a new guy in it. I assumed he was a fill-in. The haunt hired temps sometimes. But when he revved his saw, the sound hit different. Deeper, heavier. Even through the walls, I could tell. A real chain has a growl to it. A prop saw rattles. This one snarled. I peered through a slit in the wall. The guy was taller than Gabe, wearing a similar apron, but his saw had no safety tag. I radioed the floor lead. Hey, do we have a sub for butcher tonight? Static. Then negative. Gabe's on smoke break. Who's in there? No idea, I said. Saw looks real. Confirm tag. the lead said. I looked again. No tag. The oil line glistened under the strobe. Confirmed, none visible, I said. The lead went quiet. Then, hold your cue next cycle. We'll pause the line. That meant the haunt would freeze in place for a moment. Actors stop, guests move to safe zones, and we figure out what's wrong without breaking character completely. The next group came through. I stayed still, didn't start my engine. I watched. The new butcher stepped out too far, cornering guests between a foam freezer and a wall. He swung the saw in wide arcs too close for safety. The bar kissed plywood and sparks jumped. Not theatrical sparks, real ones. The sound cut through the fake screams like a gunshot. Hold code, came the radio. The house lights froze, the music stopped, and the emergency beacon switched on. A white light that meant staff only. I saw him pause, then slowly drag the chain along the foam meat hooks. I felt sick. 2 security guys appeared from a side corridor, armbands glowing in the dim. One yelled, "Drop the saw!" The man didn't move. "Drop it!" He revved once loud enough to shake the wall, then bolted through the staff curtain. I followed just far enough to see him shove through the service door, the one we'd propped open earlier to vent smoke. He sprinted into the parking lot, saw still running. The sound echoed off the cars. Security chased him, but didn't get close. Within a minute, police cruisers arrived. They boxed him in between 2 rows of cars. He finally threw the saw down and raised his hands. I stood just inside the door, shaking, watching through the fog. Guests nearby were clapping, thinking it was part of the show. When it was over, we gathered backstage. Everyone talked over each other. Gabe looked pale. "You called it?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. That chain sounded wrong. The floor lead came in with 2 officers. They asked the same questions. Did anyone know him? Did he say anything? Did anyone lend him gear? No one had. The prop manager rolled in a toolbox and held up a tag strip. "Starting tonight," he said, "every prop gets numbered and logged." The officers confirmed what we already suspected. Real saw, full chain, gas in the tank. They'd found a fuel can in his trunk. He wasn't on our payroll or any nearby haunts. When someone asked why, the cop shrugged. Some people just want to see what happens when the line between pretend and real disappears. That answer didn't sit right, but it was all we got. We shut down early. Guests waiting in line got refunds. A few were annoyed. Most were confused. Some thought it had been a stunt. One kid asked if the real Chainsaw Man would be there next time. That hit harder than I expected. Backstage, the crew sat on crates. The manager told us new procedures were coming. Metal detectors for guests, tool checks mid-shift, double ID scans at cast entry. We'd treat every piece of gear like a firearm. I remember rubbing the prop tag on my saw and thinking how flimsy it looked. Just a piece of plastic zip-tied to a handle. But that tag meant trust, and trust had almost been what got us hurt. We reopened the next night, and the crowd was bigger. Word had gotten around, the haunt that got too real. People lined up around the block. I guess that's human nature. Curiosity outweighs fear when it's somebody else's danger. Before we opened the doors, the manager gathered us in the break room. "Last night was real," he said. "Tonight, everything's fake again. Let's keep it that way." The night went smoothly. I hit every cue. The guests screamed, dropped their phones, laughed in relief. Twice, people asked if the chainsaw guy from last night was part of the story now. We smiled and said, "Nope, and that's why you're safe." It became our unofficial motto. Inside the crew, though, everything shifted. We learned the safe word drill like it was gospel. We checked every tool before and after each cycle. The manager added a rule. No one enters in costume without being seen by 2 others. The night it happened, that man must have slipped in between shifts, right after Gabe stepped out. He knew the timing, the layout. Maybe he'd worked haunts before. Maybe he just watched closely. No one saw him arrive, and that's what made it possible. That thought bothered me more than anything. The idea that he could just blend in. 2 weeks later, during cleanup, a family came through near closing time. A mom, dad, and a little kid in a vampire cape. When I did my cue, the dad jumped back and threw his arms wide to protect them, the universal dad move. The kids screamed, then laughed. After they walked out, the mom came back to the edge of my corner. "Was it safe?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "Yeah, safer than it's ever been." She smiled. "Good, he loved it." Then she left. I stood there listening to the next group enter. The distant hiss of the fog machine, the rhythm of the lights, everything exactly as it should be, and yet different now. Because once you've seen the real thing slip through the cracks, you can't unsee it. Sometimes I still dream about the sound of that real chain biting plywood, the instant when pretend became something else. I see the sparks, the foam meat hooks swaying, the guests frozen mid-scream because they couldn't tell the difference. It's not trauma in the cinematic sense. It's more like a permanent notch in your awareness. That's the part people don't understand about working in horror. The best scares come from control. The audience has to believe they might die while knowing they won't. Take away that boundary, and it stops being entertainment. It becomes chaos. That night, chaos walked in with a gas can. If you also thought Halloween was harmless fun, until these stories proved otherwise, welcome to the club. Smash that like button, hit subscribe so you never miss the next scare, and tell me which one messed with your head the most. And if you think October nights are all about pumpkin spice and haunted houses, click now to watch 4 disturbing October horror stories. Because even the sweetest nights can turn sour fast. Thanks for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.